Hello everybody, here we are just following up on yesterday's study in Daniel in our series in Bold. We were thinking about bold convictions, and I've just got a few random things, some very random things for you just to follow up that might be good for you to think about during the week. The first thing was I'd be interested, Andy said to me just a moment ago, just elaborate a little bit more on the scuba suit for me. and that made my mind start to think, what's the strangest thing you have seen in supermarkets while this coronavirus thing has been going on? I'd love to hear that. If you wanted to comment below on Facebook there, it'd be great to see some of your thoughts on the strange things you've seen. Andy had a really good one. He said toilet paper, and that made me chuckle. Some other stuff that I thought from yesterday that was worth bringing up was I had a message from one of our young adults afterwards yesterday, and he raised a really good thing about the value of habits. We spoke to the reality that convictions lead to habits, and then habits help us hold on to our convictions. And Nick Cherry said this. He said, what you were saying this morning reminded me of a great phrase from a book he'd been reading. Liberating Boundaries was the title of the book, and or the phrase. And in other words, he said, discipline equals freedom. And I thought that was really good, and I think it's a great thing for us to grapple with and to throw around our head and to think about for ourselves. We live in a world that pushes against discipline at times. We push against being constricted, and yet there is great value in it for us. And Daniel found freedom to worship in the midst of his habit, in the midst of his discipline. And I think we need to remember and remind ourselves that we can do the same thing. Our faithfulness to God, our discipline in that, can lead us to freedom to be in relationship, to engage with God wholeheartedly. I also wanted to, something I didn't get to in speaking, was the relationship between Darius and his law, and God and his law. And I read something in a commentary through the week, which I thought was really good. I wanted to say it, but I just couldn't work out where to fit it in. So I'll give it to you now. And it's looking at verse 8, which highlights that as they come back to Darius and they say, look, we've seen Daniel, and you need to be reminded, O king, oh, your magisterial brightness. You need to be reminded that law of the Medes and Persians cannot be repealed. It cannot be undone. And the commentator makes the point that not even the king can undo that law. And he says here, a law that has as its ostensible purpose the intention to set the king up as an ultimate authority actually imprisons him in its own authority. And then this commentator goes on, before we're continuing, we should note the difference between God's relationship with his law and Darius's relationship with his. The law in both cases reflects the will and desires of the one who creates the law. Darius's law reflects what he wants, and God's law reflects what God wants. Ultimately, though, Darius's law bound into a course of action he didn't want, and he would have loved to have changed his mind when he realised what the upshot of it all was, but he couldn't. He was not above the law. And then the question comes, and this just floated through my mind during the week, and then it wandered on out again a little bit, but I pose it for you to think about. Is God above his law? It's a difficult question, says this commentator. In one sense, we want to say yes, God is above everything. He's not bound by his own laws. He can do whatever he wants. However, to go down that road is misleading, and I think wrong. As opposed to Darius's relationship to the law he creates, God's law is always the perfect expression of his character. The difference between Darius and God is that the latter, God, knows himself perfectly and knows the consequences of his acts and pronouncements perfectly. And so the psalmist in Psalm 19 can speak of God's law in a way that's much different from any human law. And Psalm 19 verses 7 to 11, the law of the Lord is perfect. The statutes of the law are trustworthy. The precepts of the Lord are right. The commands of the Lord are radiant. I've just skimmed over that there. But that's worth us thinking about. And I guess it helps to turn our heart to praise in God, praise to God. As Darius did at the end of this whole episode in chapter 6, this helps us too. That we need not fear that God is sometimes trapped in his own pronouncements. His law expresses his character, and that's something to celebrate him, to worship him with. And I pray that as you go through the week, Daniel 6 will continue to be good for you and helpful, and it will help you to worship and glorify God. Thanks for being with us, and all the best for this coming week.